This morning, our conversation brought to you by Marcus and Mack, a law firm representing injured people. A very, very busy time of the year. Governor's budget address is coming up soon, isn't it?
Yes, good morning, Todd. Yes, we'll be in Harrisburg next week. The governor's will introduce his budget on Tuesday. I look forward to seeing what he has planned for Pennsylvania. Obviously, we'll be doing some negotiating, some back and forth through our appropriations budget hearings, which will begin then the following week. So we have 3 weeks of budget hearings scheduled after that with various state departments. It's going to be an interesting time. Obviously, our revenues are looking well right now. We're about $1.8 billion above expectations. Again, as I've said previously, we want to be cautious, though, because most economists do think that that's going to drop off here in the next year or two. So we want to be cognizant of that and not spend everything that we have. We need to be aware that, there are forces that come into play that could be unexpected, and we want to make sure that we keep the state budget balanced, without having to raise any taxes or fees.
Now, you're on the Appropriations Committee, so you'll be inside this process right from the start. And about a week after the governor's address, you'll get down to hearings.
Right.
How will you use that week? What happens there? Do you come up with your own plan? Do you already have a plan? Do you just crunch his numbers around and see what fits and what doesn't? How does it all work?
Sure. Well, we'll get a budget preview on Monday night as part of the Appropriations Committee, so we'll have a heads up as to what the governor is going to present. And then in the week building up to the budget hearings, we'll look and dig into those numbers more closely. And a lot of the questions that we'll formulate will have to revolve around, why are you asking for these increases? How are you going to use this money? Are these expenses justified? How are you cutting cost? All those things come into play as far as formulating the questions. And we'll do that as a team, as an appropriations team, putting those questions together. And then we'll go through 3 weeks of budget hearings, as I said, with various state departments, Department of Health, Department of Human Services, Transportation, really digging into those numbers, because these are big budget items that we're talking about here. We're looking, in the billions, and we want to know how those monies are being spent. Are we being prudent with taxpayer dollars? Are we not spending things? Are we not spending on things that aren't necessary? We want to make sure that we are responsible for the taxpayer money.
Of course, a lot of it will have to do, there will be a lot of discussion on the state system of higher education and their appropriations request, which is higher than it has ever been. And a very large increase. So you'll get to working on that. To you, what are the budget priority items that you think have to occur in this year's plan?
Well, I think clearly we have to pay close attention to human services. We're in a healthcare crisis right now, not just because of the pandemic. We're in a mental health crisis. Our healthcare workers are overstressed. Last week, we passed that bill that provided $250 million in relief funds for our healthcare workers, for our hospitals, our facilities, and that was a great thing to do. But we need to look long term. Our healthcare needs. Obviously, education is a challenge right now too. We're really stressed as far as teachers and the burdens upon them. We want to make sure that we're providing for education, but making sure that it's efficient and it's being used wisely. I think transportation, clearly, with the bridge collapse that drew attention to the state of our bridges, and we've all known that. I mean, all the way back to my PennDOT days, we've had structurally deficient bridges that needed to be addressed. So we have to look at how we're funding transportation. Again, I think we have to look at being more efficient with the taxpayer dollars. There are a lot of processes that are in place, a lot of government red tape that adds to cost when it comes to transportation, and a lot of the departments. There's a lot of red tape, and we learned through the pandemic that a lot of that red tape isn't necessary. So how can we cut? How can we be more efficient? We're going to look at things like that. But again, we want to make sure that we're funding the essential services that people need. And I think the Department of Human Services is a nebulous department. It's very big. It's close to half of the state budget. But those programs are necessary. And I hear it firsthand. I see it firsthand, working with the committee. I'm on the Human Services Committee. I'm also on the Children and Youth Committee. A lot of those needs are pressing right now. Families are struggling, children are struggling, and we want to make sure we're meeting those needs and helping people get through this.
I want to come back to something you just said in a moment, but let's stay right there on human services.
Yes.
I know that it's been a concern of yours for quite some time about mental health care, and in particular, when there is no obvious solution for somebody with a mental health problem, no place to put that person, for want of a better way to express it. Often they get dumped on hospital emergency rooms, and they're just not equipped for that. I know that's been a big concern of yours.
And it's still a continuing concern. I hear examples. I just heard an example last week. I had a meeting with the Pennsylvania Hospital Association on Friday. I have a bill, House Bill 1644, that would require the Department of Human Services to come up with a plan. And you said it. It's exactly that. There simply aren't enough facilities or aren't facilities that are equipped to handle these mental health patients. And that creates a challenge. And unfortunately, what happens these patients are stuck in the emergency departments at hospitals, and that is not only not healthy for those patients. It puts an unnecessary burden on the emergency departments. It adds increased cost to the hospitals, and that's really the catalyst behind moving forward with this. I commissioned a study 2 years ago to look at how we could address this problem. It's a big issue. It's not going to be solved with one piece of legislation, but we are trying to chip away at it. So we're working on that bill right now. Hopefully have another hearing on it. We had a hearing right before Christmas. I would like to see that move forward, though, because it is pressing and it does add increased costs to our healthcare industry.
Yeah. Okay. Something else that you mentioned a couple of moments ago. You have a background at PennDOT. It wasn't an engineering background, but you worked at PennDOT for a number of years.
Yes.
So you've been abreast of this situation with the bridges here in Indiana County and all across the Commonwealth
Yes.
for quite some time. I think Pennsylvania has more bridges than any other state. And Pittsburgh has more than any other city.
Yes.
Our bridges are in really bad shape. And finding the money to fix them is one thing. Actually getting the work done is another thing. But
Right.
then there is the ongoing situation where these bridges are being treated in the wintertime with salt. Salt deteriorates the structures of the bridges.
Right.
There are all kinds of factors that go into it. The bridge solution is not going to be easy at all, is it?
Well, it's not going to be easy, but again, you have to get to ways that are more efficient. A lot of the costs that come with transportation projects are the clearances that are necessary. You're spending millions of dollars on pre-engineering before you even get to the engineering, not to mention the construction costs. So if you could find a way to cut down on some of that work, I know that a lot of it's important, but is there a way that we could be more efficient in getting these bridges to construction? And then the maintenance costs are really compounded, as you said, by salt. That's why PennDOT has bridge crews out there in the summertime cleaning bridges. But the maintenance part is really important. And how we fund that, there's a lot of talk about tolling bridges that a lot of people aren't happy with around the Commonwealth. The gas tax was increased, back in 2013, but now you're looking at more electrical vehicles on the roads, more efficient vehicles that simply aren't, using as much gas, so you're not getting as much revenue as far as the gas tax. How do you compensate for that? So the problem is there. I think we're looking at a number of different solutions, and we will ask those questions during the budget hearing of the Transportation Secretary, because it behooves them to come up with a solution that we can all work toward together.
We'll watch this budget situation as it unfolds over the next several months and see what kind of spending plan you come up with, how difficult the battle is
Yes.
in Harrisburg. What are some of the other things that you want to see happen here in this spring session?
Well, I think it's important that we continue to work towards helping families. A lot of people are struggling right now. We're going to continue to have the debate on the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, which, clearly as costs for everything right now are continuing to increase. It's a pretty well-known fact that Reggie states pay more for their electricity, and the consumers are the ones that are going to bear the brunt of that. And as we continue to move forward, I know that we're working on some alternatives to try and convince the governor that this isn't a good plan for Pennsylvania, but that clearly has to be something that we work towards, because it will be a burden on working families.
That auction, the December auction price was shocking, wasn't it?
Yes, and you can't ignore that. The climate change discussion aside, we're talking about increased costs for working families in Pennsylvania. We're talking about increased costs for manufacturers. We're talking about increased costs for every industry in Pennsylvania. We did some good things last week by changing the tax code, at least passing those bills on to the Senate to ease some of those tax burdens on small businesses in Pennsylvania. Our tax structures are really not in line with federal tax structures, Todd. That's why we made those changes last week. And this will hopefully help make Pennsylvania more competitive. Why would you want to come to a state that has an increased tax burden when you can go right next door? And we've already seen that. We're seeing industries move to other states or relocate right on the border of Pennsylvania because of our tax codes, because of the impending threat of more taxes on our industries. And we need to change that. We need to make Pennsylvania more competitive. We need to bring businesses and jobs back to our communities.
All right. I wanted to ask you a question from a political side, and I know that you announced that this week, as
Yes.
you told us last month, that you were going to be running
Yes.
for re-election. And of course, the House of Representatives every 2 years, that's the case. We get a whole new House, or potential for a whole new House every 2 years. There will be Senate races as well. Mm-hmm. But this is also a gubernatorial election year. So we'll be getting a new governor from one party or the other come next January. How does all of that, if it does at all, how does all of that play into what actually gets done here in Governor Wolf's last year?
Right.
And with the upheaval with the legislative reapportionment, with the redrawn congressional lines, all of these things are coming together to make a very uncertain situation in Harrisburg, and we wonder, will things actually get done there this year?
Well, I'm going to continue to work hard, and I know that a number of my colleagues are going to work hard as well. We still have to provide the essentials for the people of Pennsylvania. Elections aside, redistricting aside, governor races aside, federal races aside, we still have to do the work for the people that they elected us to do, and I'm going to continue to do that. Now, yes, there is going to be a lot of energy, a lot of distractions pulling people in different directions, but we need to stay focused. We're still going to be going to Harrisburg. We're still going to be voting on legislation. We're still going to be working on bills that help Pennsylvania families, help our businesses, help our communities. We're going to have to run again too, and you're already seeing the commercials inundating. Basically for the Senate race, for the governor's race, there's a lot of people vying for these positions, and rightly so. Those are very important positions. It is going to be an interesting year, to say the least.
Interesting is one word. I can think of others.
Yeah, for sure.
He's State Representative Jim Struzzi with us this morning. Thanks so much for coming.
Thanks for having me, Todd.
We appreciate it. It is the voice of Indiana County, WCCS, 101.1 FM and AM 1160. A couple of moments away from